all the satellite inputs from China and Russia in addition to its own. So under these circumstances, to what extent does Israel really succeed in breaking their back is something that is to be seen, or is it a symbolic attack only? What America has been saying to Israel, that carry out a symbolic attack wherein you upheld your prestige and yet not cause such devastation to Iran that they've been forced to react and the war becomes much bigger in the Middle East. Even now, I'm very certain that there's bound to be a very strong and fierce Iranian reaction and the war is going to enlarge. The consequences of this war are going to be felt by everybody and anybody, whether you are participant or you're not participant. Because global warming is going to increase. Look at the amount of bombardment that is taking place already in the Middle East and in Russia and Ukraine.
Cycle.
So global warming is increasing. Climate is getting affected. You have severe cyclones coming all over. Frequencies increase. Unprecedented rainfall.
Right, Mr. Sehgal, my colleague Gaurav Sawant is also joining us on the broadcast. Gaurav.
General Sehgal, welcome on the broadcast. General, can Israel afford a symbolic strike? Because Israel is surrounded by hostile elements. Can Israel actually afford a symbolic strike, or will Israel actually bomb Iran to degrade its war-fighting capabilities, and the attacks, whether it's on whether it's suppression of enemy air defenses or taking down their military infrastructure where they manufacture these long-range missiles and rockets, will it actually be for effect and result?
This is a very interesting question. As far as Israel is concerned, Israel is wanting to go for the kill. But it's the Americans who we know all the time cautioning them so that the war does not get enlarged and the other forces do not enter the war, to limit it to a symbolical. But Israel does what it always wants to do. They do not care about what the American advice is. So Israel apparently is gone in for hitting their military assets. But what are the military assets? I had already enumerated some of them. But what has been the success is something that is yet to be known. Since morning, I've been seeing the CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera. Nobody's been able to tell what has been the consequence or the result of this attack. But that's notwithstanding,
True.
Iran is bound to retaliate. How soon that retaliation takes place, one does not know. And the war is definitely going to get enlarged. As far as America is concerned, America has made an announcement that they've not been involved in this war at all, other than providing air defense resources in terms of hard to boost up their air defenses. Because of late, if you notice, Hezbollah's rockets and missiles have been succeeding and their Iron Dome system has been failing. Because it's been active for more than 1 year. It requires continuous maintenance and sustenance and spare parts as well as missiles. And there's apparently shortage of all these.
P.K. Sehgal, former diplomat for... Now joining me on the broadcast, Brigadier General Amir Aivi, who's the founder and the chairman of IDFS, which is the Israeli Defense and Security Forum. He's joining me from Tel Aviv. I would like to start by asking you, Amir, now we have seen that threats have started flying thick and fast from both the sides. On one side, it is Israel, which is saying that our action has been in retaliation to what Iran has been doing. Do you believe the strikes will continue, or do you believe now covert operations will start taking place?
I believe that we are in the beginning of a long campaign. At the end of the day, Israel understands that there is an historic opportunity to deal with this imminent danger of nuclear Iran, which is not only a danger to Israel, it's a global threat, it's a regional threat, and it needs to be dealt. Iran is moving steadily towards nuclear capabilities. They want global domination. They want to control the Middle East, and this needs to be dealt with. So I think that this attack is the beginning of a long-term campaign which will end only one way. This regime, Iranian regime, on its knees and not posing any threat, not to Israel, not to the region, and not to the world. And the big question is Israel going to deal with this alone, or are we going to see a change of administration in the US and the US leading a coalition and dealing seriously with Iran and dismantling all these Shia axis. If this is done, this will bring prosperity and peace and a big alliance, a Western Israeli-Sunni alliance in the Middle East and beyond, that will extend all the way to Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, Oman. There is a huge opportunity to really bring prosperity and security and stability to the Middle East. It cannot happen without dealing militarily with Iran and stopping their aggression.
Amir, you made a very important point. You are saying that this war will end in only one way, and the idea is to make sure that Iran and its allied proxies cannot harm people in the entire region. Do you believe then these kind of missile attacks will continue in days to come?
Well, I think that the Iranians have to consider what they're going to do. Israel destroyed most of their air defense, targeted their industries and ballistic missiles. We see that Israel has full freedom of operation in Iran and can operate anywhere at any time and hit precisely any place. So we'll have to see what Iran will do. And they also are considering the fact that the U.S. Is going to elections. I think that what will define what will happen in the future will be the policy of the next administration, but also the policy of President Biden after these elections, no matter who wins. The big question is, what kind of heritage does Biden want to leave? Is it going to be appeasement and weakness, or showing strengths and dealing with the threat of nuclear Iran?
Amir, do you believe, because the change of guard in the United States is just a couple of days, we will see how 5th of November is when the United States is going for elections. So we will see in the next couple of days that change of guard taking place in the United States. Will that impact the relationship that Iran and Israel has at the moment?
Well, I think that a change in the relationship between Iran and Israel has to go through bringing down this evil regime. The Iranian people like Israel and like the Jewish people. But this regime has really decided they'll do anything possible to destroy Israel. They even set a date in 2040 where they want to destroy completely Israel. And this is obviously not going to happen. Now, we know throughout history, whether it was the Nazis or anybody else who tried to undermine Zionism and Israel, it ended by these entities disappearing from the world. So Israel is not going to stop until Iran is not going to pose a threat. And we have to remember that Israel is dismantling the strategic depths of Iran. All the national security way of thinking of Iran is building a strategic depths like Hezbollah, like Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen. And Israel is systematically dismantling these strategic depths. This might create a reality where Iran will try to accelerate their nuclear plans, and therefore we're entering a kind of race. They will try to accelerate and reach nuclear capabilities. Israel and the West need to stop this, and therefore I see this campaign continuing throughout these elections in the U.S. and beyond the next administration.
Amir, we have seen how missile attacks are taking place, eliminating terrorists. That is one side of the war. The other side that we are seeing is hitting the economy of Iran. So do you believe that this is a multi-frontal war, that Israel will continue hitting the economy of Iran? Do you think that's also on agenda?
Basically, there are 4 different kinds of targets Israel might hit. It can be oil refineries. It can be the leadership of Iran. I want to remind you that the Iranians have tried to kill Trump and also Netanyahu. So really also hitting their leadership might be an option. We're talking about military sites and we're talking about nuclear sites. So there are many different targets. Important thing is dealing with the nuclear sites and stopping the plans of Iran to become nuclear. Now, if Israel needs to do this alone, this will take time. It's a long campaign. If the U.S. joins and leads a coalition, what Israel did in a week or two
Right.
against Hezbollah, a coalition can do in a few days in Iran. Iran is a tiger paper. They can be dealt with, but it requires leadership from the US and leading a coalition.
Thank you, Brigadier General Amir Aivi, for joining me on the broadcast. Brigadier General Amir Aivi making a very important point and saying that this is not just a war being fought on one front, but multiple fronts. The United States of America, which has made it very clear to Iran that if it responds, then United States will come to the defense of Israel. United States has called Israeli strikes proportional. The United States in a statement has said the response was proportionate. We sent a message to Iran that if it responds, we will defend Israel. Senior Biden administration officials said Israel's strikes on military style appears to have been targeted and proportional, and that it should be the end of the direct exchange of fire between both the nations. This is the United States of America coming out with a statement and a warning also for Iran. It is the United States which has said that we want to make it very clear to Iran that now if it responds, it will be the United States of America that will defend Israel. Joining me on the broadcast, Adrian now, who's a terrorism and Middle Eastern scholar. Also joining me, Shiv. Shiv, take it away. Can you hear me, Shiv? Can you hear me, Shiv? Joining me on the broadcast, Adrian Calamy, who's a terrorism and Middle Eastern scholar and also a fellow at the Arabian Peninsula Institute. Adrian, we are now seeing a proxy war, and you know, this is what everyone has globally known, that this in fact is also a direct confrontation, but also a proxy war of sorts taking place. Where do you believe this war will head to over the coming months? Because now we are seeing United States also making very clear statements, sending out a stern message to Iran, saying what has happened was proportional, but you should not have a retaliatory stance now.
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for having me on the show. What we see right now is, I was listening to Shiv's comments before. It was that statement that we can reach out, that we can touch you, that we can inflict enough damage, and that's certainly the message that Israel wants to send to the Islamic Republic. Now, did the Islamic Republic get that message loud and clear? I'm not sure if they did. The first time Israel struck back after Islamic Republic barrage, they took out an S-300 site, which was a radar site protecting one of the nuclear facilities. This time, they took out, it would look like a bunch of radar stations, and then hitting a bunch of drone factories and missile factories. Once the dust clears, we'll see. Now, the big question is, has deterrence been restored? I don't know if it has. The Islamic Republic also, you mentioned, great point, war by proxy. This has always been a war by proxy. That's the game that the Islamic Republic wants to play. Truthfully, they don't want a direct confrontation with Israel, but they have been crossing that line. And this is the first time that we've seen in this conflict with the Islamic Republic launching missiles directly from their soil at Israel.
Is it likely that Iran will retaliate to this, or does this bring closure to the October 1st attack? There was always a certainty that Israel would respond, because that was 180 ballistic missiles plus that were launched at Israeli facilities. Does this in some way kind of close that book and move this conflict to the next, whatever chapter comes ahead?
I would hope so. I mean, great question, and I would absolutely hope so. I am just not sure enough that Israel did enough to reestablish deterrence. And one of the things that I think they needed to do, that they needed to take that extra step, was to target the oil facilities of the Islamic Republic, because that's how they fuel the proxies. As I said before, it's war by proxy, and this is how they fuel Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the Iraqi proxies, you name it. So I'm not sure if it's enough. We're going to have to wait and see, because this is still fog of war, and we'll see what the damage assessment is tomorrow.
Is it possible, Adrian, that direct economic facilities like oil facilities or ports were not targeted, perhaps because the United States, has an election coming up and they wouldn't have wanted that, and also the possibility of an oil terminal being struck would have, more directly possibly triggered a larger kind of escalation with, Russia maybe wanting to, step in some way?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it would have triggered a larger escalation drawing in Russia. I think the Russians are probably upset that the drone and missile factories have been hit, because the Islamic Republic has been sending them there. You do bring up a great point. I wouldn't be surprised if pressure came down from the United States not to hit those oil facilities, even though the United States is not an importer of Iranian oil.
Could you give us your reading, Adrian, of what you think might actually happen next? The talk of a disengagement in terms of a de-escalation, some kind of a ceasefire agreement. Do you think that the air becomes more clear towards at least talking about that? Both sides have had their say, quote unquote, with their missiles now. Does the atmosphere become a little more conducive towards ceasefire talks?
I really think it does become more conducive, only because Tehran is absolutely reeling right now. Their number one threat and their greatest threat to Israel has always been Hezbollah, or not always, but in recent years, last 20 something years, it's been Hezbollah, and they've been absolutely decimated. If you look at the Houthis, they've been hit. Does the Islamic Republic resort and go back to war by proxy, or do they go back to this type of terrorist attacks that they're known for, such as hitting Israeli embassies in Argentina, or a cultural center in Argentina, or striking targets in India? They have made several attempts in India in the past. So we'll have to see. I would think that the Islamic Republic would want to pivot away from this direct confrontation and move it more towards get it away from the region. It's not going in their favor right now. Hamas is a spent force, at least in Gaza.
Final question, Adrian, in that case is, with the US election just a couple of weeks away now, what kind of bearing do you think that that will have on the way things pan out now between Israel and the forces surrounding it? Do you think it's going to have a kind of calming effect, the election?
That's a great question, and I'm not quite sure, because if you look at the Islamic Republic's strategy, this war against Israel and these attacks, it's also a war against the West. And we know that the Islamic Republic is openly trying to meddle in the U.S. elections. Now, does it benefit them one way or another? I think U.S. being uncertain of who the next president is and how it will influence will work in the Islamic Republic's favor. But any communication coming from Biden, you have to remember he's a lame duck. He's a lame duck president at this point.
Yeah. With the big news coming in and the confirmation that Israel has struck Iranian military targets for now, Iran's foreign ministry, correct myself, Iran's foreign ministry has issued a statement. I first quote it here. Iran has said, entitled and obligated to defend foreign aggression is what Iran has said, adding, I quote it here, capable of defending Iranian people. And this is amid the confirmation of the strikes that have come. But remember, does this mean that if Iran strikes back at Israel, will it be in a manner much stronger and sharper against Israel? Are we looking at now not a multi-pronged war for Israel with Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, but also an official full-fledged war between Israel and Iran? So that is the big news coming in. Remember, it's been over a year now that there's been heightened escalation in West Asia, specifically since October 7, 2023. But a year later, while there were a warlike situation already, but now it appears with Iran officially getting involved and Israel striking back, perhaps it looks like this could turn into a bigger regional conflict. I want to go across, and now joining me in this telecast is Amir Yadlin. He's a former head of Israel's defense intelligence. Thank you so much for joining us on